By the way, we record this so that you guys can access it later and get the information that you might want. Or should you have a spouse who you want to say, now listen to this part, and that happens sometimes, you can find it here. And Tammy has graciously made that happen. I'm here every week and on another site called In the Rooms every Friday night because I think that these are very difficult issues: sex, love, intimacy, relationship, attachment, the kind of grief that comes up around it. I have a lot of experience, you know, a quarter century of experience working with people who have really struggled with the pain of betrayal and infidelity, and have to put it in a context of illness rather than that person's just a jerk. And so there's a lot of ways to talk about that, because I think for a spouse, it's a different experience than if someone just cheated on you, but the feelings are the same. So anyway, all the questions that you might want to ask around that, we give you this time to get access to an expert for free. And I believe that you should be able to, you know, if you're going to buy books or you're going to go to treatment or you're going to do it, you should be able to access an expert whenever you want. And Lord knows, you know, we are well compensated. This is a good way to give the work back to you at no cost. And that's my belief. Well, we're not that well compensated.
I was just going to say,
it's true, we're not. But, you know, I wanted to say it anyway. Anyway, so I see there's questions down there. And the way it works is Tammy asks them, I answer them. She also often has really good direction from her own experience in recovery and working with all of you for so long. So let's go.
Okay, first one. Should I install spyware on my husband's computer and phone? If yes, how does this develop trust in his recovery and our relationship?
I wouldn't necessarily put it on his computer without his knowing. What I would say to him is, I don't trust you, and I don't have any reason to trust you, and I want to rebuild trust with you. But in order to do that, I want to see every keystroke for the next weeks or 3 months. It isn't something I would do forever, but I mean, I've written a lot about this. You know, I'm not a believer in codependency. I don't think there's anything wrong with someone who's been betrayed wanting to know, are you finally telling me the truth? And how would you really know that unless you're able to track it? Now, I will say that your husband or partner can always find somebody else's computer to use or get it. You know, there is no guarantee on that, but I think that it is, you know, I often get asked this in the media. Sometimes I do TV and radio and all that stuff. And they say, well, when would a spouse have the right to have all the access codes to someone's Facebook and Instagram and all that? When would you give that to your spouse? And my answer is, you know, when you have trust, then each one of us has the right to have a private life. And if I want to have a private life on Instagram or Snapchat, really it's not any of your business, because you trust that I'm not doing anything on there that would betray us or our relationship or hurt our family. But if you find out that I have done things on those places to betray our trust or hurt our family, then you bet that you now have the right to be able to look at anything that I put up online, because I have broken trust. And in order to restore trust, I have to earn it back by doing a whole bunch of things that are going to make me feel uncomfortable and like I shouldn't have to, like, you know, having you track my online life. But you know what? In the scheme of things, if I want to stay in this relationship, and that's all you're asking of me, I don't think it's such a big deal.
John Taylor on his webinar earlier today answered a question. It was along those lines. It was kind of like what type, and he differentiated between tracking and everything else. So that one will be posted because we record them. So you can check that one out. It'll probably go up tomorrow or Wednesday at the latest, but I'd invite you to take a look at that particular one too, because he did a really good job of answering a little differently, but with a different context. Next question. I'm having trouble understanding the difference between acceptance, forgiveness, and reconciliation. What are your definitions?
Is this a spouse or an addict, do you think?
I don't know. And I'm kind of thinking partner, but.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure that those words might have particular meaning to you that they don't to me. So I think what might be more useful is like, what is the process of healing, or what might I go through as a partner? And I think, you know, it certainly varies from person to person. I've worked with partners who, you know, as angry as they are, they understand that the person they love has a serious problem. They've kind of always known. They had known enough about the person's history to know that there's a problem. And so the acceptance part is not as big a deal, because it's kind of like, oh, Right. Yeah, of course you did these things. Look how you're up. So that, we can get to some sort of acceptance fairly readily. Forgiveness is a process, Some people think forgiveness is, I'm sorry, I forgive you. It's not. It's just as much of a process as grief, which takes many stages over sometimes many years. And forgiveness, and there's some good books on forgiveness. You might want to look some recent books up on forgiveness, because there's a whole process that we go through in coming to forgiveness. And sometimes we don't forgive and or are unable to forgive, and that's okay too. So, and then you say reconciliation. To me, reconciliation is in this context, people who have decided to stay together and move on. And reconciliation, if you will, I think is something that takes also a while, that has kind of milestones, like we're beginning to trust again, we're dating each other again, we've had sex for the first time, we're working through the anger of the past, kind of there's levels to reconciliation. So I don't think any of those things, except maybe acceptance, happens all at once. I think acceptance can be something that you can really say, okay, I'm just going to open my heart to this pain and this whatever it is, and be willing to embrace the whole process. I think that's something that once we've decided to do that fully, we can do. But forgiveness and reconciliation are both processes that go through kind of expected ways of moving, and you can actually learn more about them. There are books on forgiveness and reconciliation. If you want to know one, write us a note and I'll recommend one.
One of the things I found for me too was it was helpful for me to learn that forgiveness is something, if I forgive you, it helps me too. Like whether it helps you or not, it really is about the process of me learning to heal over that. So, and it's not forgive and forget. Like when people go,
Never.
Oh, forgive and forget, it's never forget. Yeah. It's just going like, I'm not going to allow this to invade my brain and take up space all the time. So, so that was really helpful for me to learn that, I think it gave me a bit of control over it too, that it didn't feel like it was happening to me. I could engage in the process, like Dr. Rob was talking about. I could engage in the process and move forward, and eventually was able to let go of it to a place where it wasn't controlling me again.
I want to add, I think that, you'll know when you're in a place of this acceptance, or at least that part, when when you're moving along, I write a lot about this in Out of the Doghouse, but really recovery from infidelity is like a roller coaster ride. And I will tell you that you're not going to give forgiveness or come to reconciliation nearly as quickly as your spouse is going to want you to. And one of the things that's difficult is you're facing some guy or gal who's cheated on you and did all this stuff, and they're 90 days in or 6 months in, and they're like, look, I've been working hard, I've been going to meetings, I've been going to therapy, time for you to forgive me. And, we're not ready. And I think one of the more important things that I really want spouses to understand is that you have the right to be angry for a year, whether that person is okay with it or not. And no, your anger will never drive them back to acting out. That's a choice they make. They could just as easily go for a walk. So I think that, and I also know that beyond about a year and a half, should the person who's been cheating really, really is working on it and really, really is dedicated to healing, if your anger is still at that real peak place a year in, and the person you're living with is not giving you reason for that, then I think at a certain point you have to say, well, is my anger productive? And I really love that term. It's like, yeah, I'm angry, but I really want to get back into the relationship. Is my anger getting in the way because he or she's doing the right things? And those would be good questions to ask maybe 9 months, a year. But 6 months in, you're going to be angry. And the last piece, and Tammy knows I've said this a million times, is I want to say to every one of your spouses, to every one of you spouses, that it is not your job to support my recovery if I'm your husband or your wife and I'm the addict. I appreciate that you understand I have to go to support groups and meetings and therapy. I appreciate that you let me out of my family responsibilities to go do that, understanding that I need to go do those things in order to get better. But I don't expect you to feel sorry for me. I don't expect you to celebrate each stage of my recovery. I expect my spouse who's been betrayed and cheated on to spend the better part of the next 8 or 9 months figuring out what's the license plate on the bus that just hit me, and trying to put your life back together and have a reorganized view of us. to see if we can go on and reconcile.
The next question, you said the cheater should give all control to the betrayed spouse, but what if that is what led to the betrayal?
I'm guessing this is an addict asking this question.
I don't know, but I'm kind of...
Okay, well, I don't know what all control means, and I never said that you're supposed to give all control to your spouse. I just said that you're one down, which means, you know, it used to be like, hey, I'm heading out and I'll see you in an hour, and okay, have fun, but you're not in that, you're not in that place anymore. You have cheated, therefore, your spouse doesn't trust you. Therefore, you have to say, I'm leaving for an hour and this is where I'm going and I'll call you when I get there. And if I'm going to be late, I'll call you and I will bring the bag back from the store, because they don't trust us. And we have created that mistrust. So it is our responsibility to be much more available to give the answers when they're asked without resentment. Now, if you have a controlling spouse, that's a whole different issue. How you separate out this person's control over you, or what you feel is control over you, versus their mistrust and their fear that you're going to act out again, those are difficult things to separate, to be honest with you. And I cannot fully help you with that. I think that's something a therapist can help you with, or someone who's in your life who can say, well, Mary always was a little difficult around this, but, you know, since you did that, you know, maybe you need a little bit of feedback, because when you're that person who's done the cheating, it all feels like control to you. It all feels like anger to you. It all feels like you're never going to get a break, because, you know, we're trying hard and we want to get past this, and our spouses often aren't ready. And that is our acceptance, that as much as I want to be back in that nest, they are not ready.
I want to add something. I'm going to parrot what you've said a bunch of times. There's nothing that a partner can do or not do that can lead to the betrayal. So there were lots of other choices along the way.
Right.
It doesn't get to be, well, they did this, so now I'm going to go act out sexually with whatever. So,
Tammy, I'm so glad you brought that up, because there was an implication in the question that my spouse's controlling nature is what led to my acting out, and I didn't catch that. And the truth is, you could have left him or her. You could have gotten a divorce. You couldn't have volunteered for something. You could have bought yourself a fancy car. There are lots of things you can do if you have a controlling spouse, other than go have sex with a bunch of people that you don't know, or whatever it is you did. So even implied with that question is blame. Your blame of your spouse for what you did. But the truth is, you are fully responsible for what you did. I don't care if your spouse nagged you all day long and gained 300 pounds. You could leave them if you want, but saying, well, my response to them being controlling is I'm going to go out and have sex with whoever I want, whenever I want, or have that affair, or that's not a healthy response to feeling controlled. So thank you for catching that, Tammy, because it is never a spouse's responsibility, no matter how difficult the spouse, if I choose to go act out.
So what do you think about polygraph tests after disclosure to be sure I have the truth, and how often?
Well, that's a good question. There's lots of debate in my field about this. I think this is my belief. If your spouse is going through this for the first time, and you really knew nothing about this, whatever the behavior was, and now you've heard about it, and now you know there was a lot, and I don't necessarily, and then you get a disclosure, I don't necessarily think the polygraph is necessary. I really don't think that is what it's for. Excuse me, in the writing I've done about it, I don't think I indicate that. What I think it's for is when you are a spouse who thinks they got the truth, but then was lied to a whole lot, and then was told, oh no, that's everything, and then they were lied to a whole lot. And then a year later, they thought everything was fine, and then they found that they were still being lied to. In other words, I think polygraph is for someone who has gone through years, literally, of thinking they knew the truth and then they didn't, and thinking they knew, and now you're kind of like, gosh darn it, you have lied to me so many times over so many years that I don't know if I can go back to what we've shared or even move forward without determining that this is it. Because I don't want to come home tomorrow night and find out there's just one more thing you never told me. So in my mind, that is what the polygraph is for. I never thought, and I think it's sort of becoming this, like, oh, every disclosure has to involve a polygraph. Absolutely not. I don't think that's what it's about. I think the whole idea of beginning to develop trust is about beginning to develop trust. Like, we've never been through this before. You're telling me your truth. I'm going to believe you the first time. So yeah, I think that my field's got a little wonky with polygraphs around spouses, no offense, who are determined to get the absolute truth. And, that's, first of all, a polygraph won't do that for you. That's not how they work. And second of all, the building trust in relationship initially through behavior and commitments made and promises kept and all of that is a much better way to approach this, I really believe, than a polygraph. But if you have a long history, as we said, there might be a place for it with a professional involved.
I had somebody, I'm just going to add this, I had somebody recently that reached out that said that they were committed to doing a polygraph like annually or something. And, I was like, only if that really serves your relationship, because to me, it seems like it would just be one of those. Go ahead.
I will say this. If I'm a chronic cheater, to be honest with you, the best guarantee that I'm not going to chronically cheat is a polygraph every year. Because if I know in my head that I'm going to have to face that, for those of us who just lie, we lie, and if you're out there, you will lie, like lying just comes naturally. And that you might get into a situation where if there's no guarantee you're going to be found out, then you're going to lie. If you know yourself well enough, then I think as an addict or as the person who's been the cheater, you might volunteer for that polygraph because it will keep you sober. There's nothing like the fear of being caught and knowledge that the catcher is about to catch us that may bring some honesty. So, I think for the person who's willing, who's really dedicated to their recovery, it's a really great way to stay on the path. But I would not suggest it for marital stability.
Okay, next question. My husband has been in recovery since January. We're both working with a trained therapist and in 12-step groups. How can we start to build intimacy without having sex?
Okay, that's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
I think I wrote about this, I want to say,
Yes,
but I'll talk about it. So we look at intimacy as being a whole kind of continuum of things that aren't necessarily sex, like vaginal sex or oral sex or masturbation. For those of us who have these issues, I think a lot of us first come together with passion and intensity, like lots of couples do. But what we can miss out on in all of that is hand-holding and long conversations and washing someone's hair for them and helping them pick their clothes for the day and giving them a massage and taking a bath with someone. And so I think there are so many ways that physical and emotional intimate energy can be created. I would rather you longed to be sexual with each other than we're actually having it. I think I would love to see you long to sleep together, but be sleeping in separate rooms while you're kind of dating. I often suggest to couples that if you're going to have a restart, you should really restart and don't have sex and start getting to know each other, the way you did in the beginning, or maybe the way you always meant to but didn't in the beginning, slowly and a little bit at a time.
Okay, I'm struggling to write my impact letter to my husband. We had disclosure in March and he's been dedicated to recovery since. Do you have any resources that can help? I recognize the importance of going through sharing my reality with him, but I am resisting it because of all the pain that comes back.
Okay. So let me first explain what an impact letter is. A lot of times in treatment, this is something that I might have actually created, I'm not sure. I really think that's possible. But in any case, what I ask clients to do when they're in treatment is, if there's a spouse at home, so we run a treatment program, our program is what it is. If you come into us, you're going to get a letter before you arrive saying that we want you as a spouse, or we want your spouse to send us a letter saying what their experience was. So you may come into treatment with me and you say, oh, I did this and I did this with porn and I did that in strip clubs and I did this in an affair. And you have your view of what you did as an addict or as the person who cheated. But when I'm working with you, I also want the view of what it meant for your spouse. So I want to hear what his or her days have been like, what his or her feelings are like, what they feel they brought up or not that you haven't been paying attention to, because their voice in treatment is very, very important. So an impact letter is a spouse sitting down and saying, hey, this is what I've been through over the last 6 years or 9 years or 6 months or whatever it is. And this is where I feel you've let me down, and this is where I feel you haven't. And, it's really just an opportunity for us to bring the spouse into the room when you are actually home. They are difficult letters to write because we're asking you to actually bring up your experience and put it on paper. And I get that. Here's some ways that you might, these are some therapy tricks. You might dictate your letter and ask somebody to write it for you, someone close to you, so that you can just say what you need to say and not sit there and write it. You might do it in therapy so that, you're not alone in going through all those feelings. You may dictate it to Siri or some kind of online thing so that you don't have to sit there and type. You may do it in pieces where you say, okay, this morning I'm going to sit down and do 10 minutes, and then tonight I'll do 10 minutes. You might even be someone who needs to check in with someone before you start and after you're done, so you're not alone with it. We don't want you to be overwhelmed by this process. It's not meant to have you and let me say this to you. So this is important. When I ask, and Tammy knows this, when we say, please write a impact letter, it's no more than 2 pages double spaced. I've noticed that partners, not a space and a half. I know you guys, you'll get tricky with your spacing. I know that you have a great desire to say everything that you've ever felt always, and you really want to say it with an exclamation point. But I would rather you spent just simply 2 pages saying, this is how my life's been affected by what your behavior has been. And this is who I've become. This is how things have ended up. This is what I had never hoped would happen. And this is, all of that you can do in a very short statement. And the reason we want it short is because we don't want you to get overwhelmed. And we don't want to pick and choose which part we want to read in treatment because it's 7 pages long and we simply can't do that. So, if you get a page and a half out by working with a friend or a therapist, or you've done great. And you know what? You can even do dot points. You can say, here are the 7 things that made me crazy in the last year, and just A, B, C, D, E. It doesn't have to be perfect. We just want to hear you as you wish to be heard in the place where we're working with your partner.
I was thinking too, it's like you talked about with support, we have the Betrayed Partner drop-in group on Wednesdays. And I thought, I think I would write it right before that so that the next place I went was a supportive group where I could say, I just wrote my impact letter. I'm feeling blah, and you may feel a little bit of relief having written it. I don't know, but that would be your experience. But I really believe in having support, a planned support. If you have somebody that you're working with, a trained therapist, a sponsor, whatever, great. But otherwise, like I said, the Betrayed Partner group is 12:30 p.m. Pacific time on Wednesdays. They're there every week, and they can guide you before, they can guide you after, whatever you need. But that would be a safe place for you to be. Next question. Could you speak on the experience of loneliness and emptiness as something that sparks the want to act out with porn, cruising, etc.? I find that's a trigger for me.
Well, yes, I can. So I'm often asked, what are the most common issues or experiences that a sex addict or a love addict or even any addict will tend to act out over? In other words, when am I most vulnerable? And if you ask me that question, I will always say there are 2 major triggers for us. One is travel, and the other is time, unstructured time alone. I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure out that many of us had challenges when we were growing up, not getting what we needed. I think that's pretty common, or getting too much of things we didn't need, whatever it was. And as a result, for many of us, when we spend time alone, even though we're not often aware of it, we start to get anxious. We get fearful. We feel alone. And that feeling alone is difficult for us. And so we start to think about how we can immediately relieve that feeling. And if you decide to spend July 4th weekend with your wife and kids away and you have no plans for 4 days, you're probably going to act out because you're not going to get much past Thursday night when you're thinking, they're away. And the thing is, for us, we often don't experience the loneliness. We don't experience the needfulness. We move right to, oh, they're going to be away. I want to go have sex. And so what we have to do is anticipate in our recovery, wow, I'm going to have a weekend without plans. And I already know that it's likely that I'm going to get in trouble. So 6 weeks before, I'm going to make plans for what I'm going to do that Thursday morning, that Thursday evening, on 4th of July, so that with the family away, I'm still going to be engaged with people, have people around me, have plans, have something to look forward to each day. And I want to say, like, this is not something to be ashamed of. We're not little kids who are afraid of the dark. We have deep, meaningful, profound experiences that echo back decades that ring like a bell when we have fear of abandonment or loneliness. And a lot of times we don't even know where those things came from. It doesn't matter where they came from. What matters is that you know that facing unstructured time alone can lead to acting out. Great. Make sure you plan for it. You know that going to Chicago on a business trip when no one knows who you are when you're there and no one at home will know where you are, that whole lack of structure and accountability can send you spinning into acting out. Great. Plan out your travel so that you don't end up in situations that you don't want to. Do you want to go outside?
And there's all kinds of online opportunities, Rob does in the rooms on Friday nights. So that's a community. We have a number on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, the drop-in groups. There are people that I'm hearing about that are in the men's groups that are, and this may be true in other groups too, but one of the moderators told me that they're making connections and connecting outside the group too. So they're becoming support, sponsors, etc. for each other. That's all great. And somebody told me early in recovery, I'm a real small package when I'm all wrapped up in myself. And so the best way for me to be thinking about how lonely and everything else and, oh, poor me, is to go be of service to somebody else. It doesn't matter what you do. If you go be of service to someone else, you're not lonely, you're doing something positive. And that was super helpful for me too. So, okay. What do you think about the cheater who has promised the world and saying, I'll do whatever it takes to fix this, then they don't? Meaning that they are still cheating, but not following through with the things stated and giving false promises.
What do I think? I think that's cheating 101. I think if you were to write the book on how to cheat, that's not the book I've written, but in it would be, if your wife or husband finds out, lie to them, and go back to what you were doing. And if they have a question, only tell them as much as they already know and nothing else so that you can continue getting away. What you're talking about is someone who's not very interested in. So here's the deal with recovery or healing or whatever you want to call it. The one thing that I cannot help you with is motivation. I can help somebody heal some of the most profound and awful trauma that you can imagine. If not me, I can find people to do it, and we will help that person be functional if it's at all possible. But what I cannot do is make somebody drink when they're led to water and they don't want to. Your spouse is not okay, and I'll say this. When addicts are acting out, it's pleasurable. We may feel the guilt, we feel the shame, we feel the fear, but we enjoy what we do. And if it wasn't fun, we wouldn't do it. What your husband is doing is really pretty typical, which is, I want to have my cake and eat it too. And if I can convince her that I'm not really doing this, or it doesn't no big deal, or I'm almost over it, or, as long as I can keep pushing the envelope, I'm going to. And unfortunately, it is very likely that until you as a partner say, I am done with this, and if you're going to continue this, I'm done with you, and here's my plan for your getting out of here, until you actually bottom line it, not much change is going to happen. And I want to say this to all of you guys. I understand the desire to say a couple, let me just say something else. A couple of statements that are not useful for spouses. I understand that the desire to say, if you ever do this again, I'm leaving you. But it's, if he or she does that again, you better be prepared to leave. Because once you've said, oh my God, I could never take this again, if you did this, blah, 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 and then you find out they're doing it and you haven't left, you've given them a great message that says, hey, I can get away with stuff and you're not really going to follow through on your commitments. So I'm not saying that you should say you're going to leave. I'm just saying that you need to be very clear on your responses to more lying, more infidelity, and, and then follow through. Because, this is someone who is not looking for ways to make it better with you. This is someone who's looking to have their cake and eat it too. And so far for him, so good.
Next question. If the addict...
Can I say one more thing?
Oh,
I'm
sure.
sorry, Tony.
Yeah,
I just had an image. Sometimes I think in images, and I just had this image. I don't even know you, but I had this image of your house or apartment with all of his clothes and everything he owns in big black garbage bags outside the house. That might begin to create some change, and it might be kind of fun to put them in the bags. Just saying. And I would never hang them back up for him. Okay.
And I know of people who have said, here's divorce papers or a ticket to treatment, you pick. So, it really does, again, it's whatever works for you. And I know not everybody's in those positions to be able to do that. But like you said,
everyone is in a position to commit to change. And everyone is in a position to say, I will do this and this and this, and then follow through. Not everyone's in a position to come to treatment, but everyone can commit to change and then follow through. I did want to say something else about this, Tammy, that was sort of related. It's such a great...
Well, look at the last comment that was just... Here's a follow-up question to that. So are you saying that the addict will act out again because the spouse didn't leave, or what?
I think the addict's going to do whatever they want. I mean, they're going to act out or not act out. Maybe if you get angry and upset, they'll stop. Maybe not. I'm going on what was said. What I heard said was there's lying, the behavior's continuing, there's been no change. So my response to that is, okay, so what are you going to do differently? Because whatever you did before clearly did not make much of an impression on him. So what is it and I'm not talking about crying and whining, and I understand that feels effective to you, but it doesn't have much of an effect on me if I'm an addict. You can yell at me, you can cry, you can whine, you can nag, and to me, honestly, I'm so sorry, but it's like this, wah, 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 because I am focused on what I want. And as long as I can still have access to you and get what I want, that's what I want most. So I'll put up with your nagging and whining and upset as long as you don't know that I'm still doing it. So yeah, I'm not saying that you have to leave to make the change. You may leave and he may just go on another partner and cheat on them, So I don't know that this person is capable of change. I do believe that you have to have some bottom line for your own self-respect, for your own sense of dignity, for your own, and listen, if you are okay with an open marriage or a relationship, just say, honey, I've decided you can sleep with whoever you want to, and so am I. And not out of spite, but if that's what you want, you can have an open marriage. The point here, by the way, is not monogamy. We're not here week after week to make sure every couple is monogamous. What we're here to do is make sure that every couple is honest with each other, that every couple has integrity, that their intentions are followed through, that there aren't any secrets. How you guys get to choose to live out your relationship is up to you. The problem is when one person has these expectations and another person is planning on doing that, and then the person who has the expectations finds out they're being lied to and manipulated. That's the problem. How you live your sex life out is up to you. So I would say to you, what kind of relationship do you want? And if you want a relationship where your spouse is not lying, cheating, and manipulating, and you've already been through a round of, I'm not going to put up with this anymore, well, what are you going to do now? And that really is on you.
Well, and I think what you said early on was, if you say something, mean it. So don't threaten that this is it, or you're out, or I'm leaving, if that isn't really, something that you can follow through on right now. So I think being really intentional about what you say and what your behavior boundaries are, makes more sense. Now it may change. It may be that, okay, this month I'm not going to say that, but next month, now I've really had it and I'm willing to leave or kick them out or whatever. So
there are also various ways to distance yourself from someone. I mean, I don't know about some of you, but I think that we can be together, and I'm going to say, I'm not going to open my heart to you. We're going to talk about news, weather, and sports, and we're going to get through the day, and I'm not interested in anything meaningful. Until you get some help, I don't want to have a meaningful conversation with you because I don't believe you. And you can continue having a very superficial relationship, being distanced from that person and not being available to him or her until he or she decides to do something about it. But you're not wrong for doing that. Someone had a good question about this. Am I saying it's okay to swing in a relationship? What I'm saying is that if you are a sex addict that you have to be intentional about your sexual life. You have to be honest. You have to be clear. And if you have a history of lying and cheating, or pushing your spouse into swinging, or doing that and not calling it cheating, or that's bullshit. Living an honest, so my spouse says they want to be sexual with other partners and they're eager for that. I want to do that. It's okay with both of us. There's no lies, no secrets, and it is something we actually want. I don't care what you do. It's up to you, but why are you here? If you're here, it's probably because some kind of lifestyle maybe was sold as an excuse for lying and manipulation and no integrity and bringing somebody's heart over a barrel. And that is not okay. What you do sexually is up to you, but how you live out your relationship needs a lot of intention if you're going to have real love with each other.
Well, and I want to add, because I hear from partners who have felt kind of traumatized by someone going, well, we're going to swing, we're going to do whatever. And because they love this person and they want to please them, or they want to be with them, or they don't want them to, whatever, for lots of reasons, they do that. And it really isn't what they would choose to do for themselves. So what you're saying, Dr. Rob, is that if both parties are in agreement and there's no power differential in the relationship, it isn't like, well, I have all the money and all the power, so I'm going to say we're going to do this regardless of what you think, then go ahead, you're thinking.
Yeah, no, I agree. But it's not about, if you have been cheated on as a partner and lied to, and your spouse says, well, I just need to have sex with other people, and if we swing, then that's all going to take. That's not what this is. That's not okay. If you've been cheated and lied to, then you need some commitment to behavior change that involves a solo focus on you, if that is what you're looking for. And any opening up of the relationship is not something that's going to happen in the beginning. It would happen years later when you both felt safe, if that were to happen at all. So no, most of you are probably in early recovery. Most of you are probably coming to this a year in, 6 months in, 2 years in. No, I'm not saying that you're going to enter some alternative lifestyle when you're just beginning to look at lying, cheating, manipulation, and all that. But years down the line, if trust is restored and you like any healthy couple decides however they want to have their relationship, it's a mutual decision, but not one, as Tammy said, and I've heard a lot of female spouses who felt manipulated into, oh, honey, well, you love me, so swinging's okay, right? And it wasn't okay with them, and they went along with it anyway. And that really, that really disturbs me.
Okay, so if the addict refuses to get into recovery, will he be happy with the affair partner or anyone else?
Well, I mean, so I guess I would ask that question another way, which is, if an alcoholic decides to keep drinking and not change their behavior, will they be happy in their relationship with alcohol being their primary relationship? I don't know. People can drink for a really long time and be pretty happy, and then at some point it just doesn't work anymore. And so there are people who will go from affair to affair to affair and sexual situation to sexual situation, and it works for a really long time. When it stops working often, I'll give you the reason and how. The reason is because we human beings are meant to be attached, and we really are meant to pair bond. And eventually, somewhere along the way, we long for more, or we want more, or we get involved with someone who gives us more, and then we want both. And you can't have both most of the time. So, it's perfectly fine to not be in recovery. And besides it, maybe someone is happy going from affair to affair to affair. It's none of my business to say whether that's good for them or not, or they like it or they don't. But if I'm married to them and it's not okay with me, then it's not okay for our relationship. I don't know, I can't say whether your spouse is going to go off in this affair and 6 months later come back and say, oh my God, I was so wrong. This was terrible. I should have been with you all along. I can tell you, I would not put up with an affair in that way. You need to be with me, or you need to go over there and figure it out and let me know later. But these are all really kind of personal issues that are specific to your relationship and where you are at and where your partner's recovery is at. And I can only speak about them really in general ways here.
Okay, so I'm interested in starting a recovery from compulsive porn and masturbation addiction. I have no partner. What is the first thing I should do?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the question.
I'm interested in starting a recovery. So just entering recovery from compulsive porn and
First thing
masturbation.
you should do. Okay. Well, I think the most important thing to do, you're already doing, which is getting information. Get a book on sex and porn addiction. I wrote Sex Addiction 101. There's bunches of books on the market. Educate yourself. We have drop-in groups that are absolutely free, and we're not like taking anything from you. You can drop in and see what other men or women who struggle have to say. There are online 12-step meetings. There are therapists who dedicate their work to just this. There are treatment programs. So there's a whole variety all across the continuum. If you have questions, well, Tammy, you are really, excuse my language, the resource queen. So what would you recommend? It's almost really more in your court in a way.
I think if you're going to start recovery, it depends on how challenging it is to start recovery. If it's something where you feel like, okay, I can do this, I would go to 12-step meetings. I would use all the online components that we have on sex and relationship healing. I would find a good therapist to help. I would find all the support I can. If it's something that I'm concerned that I'd be able to stop myself or within the context of my current behaviors, I would go I was able to go to a treatment program and get a solid foundation. I learned so much. I was doing I've learned my lessons, I won't do that again. And I learned so much in the treatment process that I know for sure I would have relapsed. There is no way. I didn't have enough tools. I didn't have enough education. So it was really important for me to do that. That isn't for everybody. There's lots of people that can, figure this out, but getting as connected as quickly as possible. Dr. Rob talked about this a little bit ago. Downtime is bad. So making sure that you're filling your schedule and your vulnerable times, like if you go, if there's a certain time, it's like people trying to quit cigarettes. If you always had a cigarette after dinner, make sure you're going for a walk after dinner. I mean, so making sure you're changing your patterns and engaging in healthy behaviors that will helps fill the time that you spent, because if you have identified that you have a porn and masturbation addiction, chances are pretty good you spent a lot of time engaged in that activity. So making connections with real people, in a different way is really powerful and helps change things. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I think that's it's a really kind of a complex question. And again, a lot of the things I think that are coming up are very individual to the person and the couple, so we can only really answer them in a pretty general way.
Okay, so what are some of the characteristics and behaviors of a love avoidant?
So someone who is avoidant tends to, sex addicts tend to have too much and avoidants tend to have too little. So people who are avoidant there are many characteristics. They will often dress down their sexuality, not want people to see them as a sexual object. They will, coats and sweaters and not a lot of makeup, or, they will sometimes gain weight or let their bodies not be particularly attractive because they don't want people to be attracted to them. They often, it depends on the person. Some of them will say that, oh, by the way, there's this mad chat going on about swinging in the chat. So I think we should actually stop for a second and address that. So I want to, first of all, I just want to say something about this. There's a gentleman in the chat, I think, who said that he was swinging relationships before he got in a relationship, and that he told his spouse that he was into swinging and wanted to be with other partners. In other words, he wanted an open relationship. That's what he's saying. And that his partner, agreed with this. But now, for some reason, I guess she's no longer comfortable with it. And he's asking, like, why? And so the issue really is, and I think Tammy brought it up, is that people will do all kinds of things because they love you. People will do all kinds of things because they care about you. Intimacy, sometimes, intimacy is most defined by our vulnerability and being real. If you have a truly intimate relationship and you say, this is something that I like to do, does it hurt you? Does it make you happy? Does it make you feel let down? Would you just be interested in doing this because you think it would make me happy? Because listen, if you and I want to go to different movies and I decide to go to a movie with you because it's the movie you want to watch, even good or bad, it's fine. Next time we'll go to my movie. But if you invite me to go do something sexual that I don't feel comfortable about, I'm going to carry that discomfort the rest of my life into therapy, into my other relationships. So this is not a decision to ask anyone to take lightly, especially someone that you love. Rather than looking for reasons why she should go along with this since she brought it up and was okay with it in the past, I would more be looking to understand the reasons that she doesn't feel so comfortable with it now and have a lot more empathy for what it means to her. I understand as someone who's been used to getting off in multiple sex situations that you want to keep doing that. And maybe you need to keep doing that, but not in this relationship. I don't know. But I do know that it is abusive and unfair and unkind and non-empathic to manipulate a spouse into doing something sexually because you want to do it and you know that they are so connected with you that they'll go along with whatever, even though they may not be comfortable. If you know better, then you're going to live with the pain and the shame and the guilt of having pushed this person to something they didn't want to do. And just because they said they were okay with it 6 months ago or 3 years ago doesn't mean they have to be okay with it now. People get to change where they're at. And I have seen people who are into hot dating relationships 8 months in who are doing all kinds of crazy things, but 3 years in, when it got serious, they really changed the way they carried that relationship. At least one of the two did, because they got serious in a different way. So, I think it's complex, and I do hear the person fighting a little bit for the swinging, and that makes me fearful that the partner's voice is not being heard.
And someone adds, I was one of the female spouses who was coerced into an open marriage. I was a love addict, scared of him leaving me, so I agreed to it and was in so much pain for years, and I'm still recovering from it after divorce. What made matters worse was when I expressed my discomfort, my feelings were dismissed and even ridiculed.
I have worked with a lot of sex addicts, and I can tell you, our manipulation is pretty powerful. The way we for example, I had a guy that I worked with who was into public sex. He would go have anonymous sex in parks and beaches and all that kind of stuff. He's a gay guy. And he would say to me, I don't understand these boring people who think that there's something wrong with having sex in public, like having sex outside in the sunshine, among the trees. It's a beautiful, natural, and I was like, this guy's convinced himself of a whole bunch of bullshit. And so, because the truth is he was doing something that was highly arrestable. So I would suggest to you that, again, just because you have convinced yourself in any way that something is okay, or even that the culture says it's okay, it may not be okay with the person that says they love you. Let's get back to that other question. I wanted to make sure we answered it.
What are some of the characteristics and behaviors of love avoidant?
So, most of us, here's the reality, we are meant to pair bond. I have done a lot of research on this, and the reality is that we are, as human beings, we do best in relationships, preferably intimate romantic ones, that are surrounded by a lot of family and community. And for those of us who are not in intimate relationships, deeply investing in family and community is what keeps us strong and happy. And for those in unhappy relationships, we do about as well as single people in terms of longevity and happiness. But every research measure says we do better in a relationship. So I assume that we're probably meant to be in them if we can all achieve them. People who are actively avoiding intimacy, relationship, and sexuality are engaging in dis-ease or non-health. Isolation, withdrawing from romance, avoiding sexuality. Sexuality is just as much of a part of our lives as breathing or eating. It's not like alcohol where you can just say, well, I'll never drink again and my life will be happy. You can do that with alcohol and drugs, but not with sex. When we deal with sexual issues, it's more like eating. It's a naturally occurring function. And I want you to be a healthy eater, and I also want you to have healthy sexuality. The solution to healing sexual pain, sexual trauma, or sexual addiction is not avoiding sex, it's healthy sex. And avoiding sex really is just being in the same isolated, lonely place on some level as the person who's acting out and hiding it. So the two ends, not enough and too much, really leave you in the same place, alone and unhappy.
Next question. Why is setting boundaries so important, and how do you set boundaries when you have not had full disclosure?
Well, I think this is a spouse who's talking about setting boundaries in their relationship after having found out that their spouse or husband or wife is a sex addict. And when we talk about boundaries, it isn't really related to disclosure in this sense. It's more like, okay, so you've been cheating on me and I need to start feeling safe and I want to feel safe. So what kind of boundaries can I set? Oh, okay, I want you home by 6 o'clock. And if you're not home by 6 o'clock, I want you to call me and tell me exactly where you are. In fact, I want you to FaceTime me so I can see where you are. And I want you to check in with me at lunchtime because I knew you used to fool around with that person at work. So boundaries is in part saying, how are we going to conduct our relationship now in a way that's going to help me to feel safe? Because I don't feel safe anymore with your lies. And I don't believe anything you say. So I'm going to ask your behavior to show me that you're trustworthy. You come home on time, you call me, all of that. The other thing, the boundaries also go the other way. So as a partner of a sex addict, I might want to hit you. I might want to, break a chair over your head because you ruined my life and cheated on me. It's not a healthy boundary. It's crossing a healthy boundary for me to be physically abusive with you. So, or I might want to say to you, because you cheated on me, you know what, you don't deserve to live. You don't deserve to have had those children. Telling someone that they shouldn't be alive, or that the humanity is not, those are not the kinds of boundaries that I would want to cross, even in anger. So setting up boundaries, or here's another boundary. I'm not going to tell you I'm going to leave you unless I'm going to leave you. There's another one. So setting boundaries around communication, honesty, integrity, how we're going to conduct this thing, that's what boundaries are for. They're not about disclosure. They're not about what you know or don't know. They're about what leaves you feeling safe right now where you're at.
So I'm going to, this is, how do you know when a relationship is over? We just started couples counseling, no affairs or abuse, not married or children. We've been together 10 months and are just starting living together. We just can't stop fighting and being in a power struggle every day. I'm exhausted and I'm sticking to my bottom line behaviors as a love addict. However, I'm finding it hard to maintain recovery when I am in distress.
Okay, so this is a very good question. Frequent fighting is not healthy for a relationship, in the sense if it becomes toxic, which means you're always ending up in an argument, whether it's little things, big things, on a more often than not, you find yourself arguing about stuff. That's not healthy. So then the question is, well, is this an unhealthy relationship, or are there skills that we can learn to go around these kinds of fights? I'll give you an example. I have a friend that I fight with all the time, and I really care about this friend, and yet we end up in these arguments. So, and honestly, they're just drag out nasty arguments, and I don't get in arguments like that with most people, but with this person I do. And what I figured out when we talked a lot about it, and I did a little therapy, and this friend did a little therapy, is that he's a very intellectual person, and he thinks really in terms of stages and steps and organization and structure. And I'm a very emotional person, and I talk a lot about feelings. And so what we figured out is when I'm talking about feelings, he's thinking. And when he's talking about feelings, I'm thinking. And the problem is that we don't know how to listen to each other, and we're not good communicators. But we could be really solid friends if we figured this piece out. So certain things that make relationships are difficult have to do with improving skills, better listening, less reactive, more empathy, better communication. Some things are not fixable. Who somebody is not fixable. How they approach life and their basic ways of thinking about love and relationships, not changeable. If you're with somebody who likes a lot of communication and a lot of touching base and a lot of holding, and you're someone who really likes to have a lot of space and touch base only when necessary and communicate only about important issues, you're not going to get along. It doesn't matter how much work you do, because the basic sense of who you are and what makes you feel safe with another person is so different that it can't be gotten around. So I always thought, and this is something I learned early in therapy, early in learning about therapy, is there are things you can fix in relationships and things you can't. You can fix communication, listening, empathy, compassion, a broader sense of how we see each other, but who someone is, how they are, with you how they are with other people, their basic reactions to life, and their basic stance on life, you're not going to change. And so I would look at, what are your arguments really about? Are they about the issues, or are they about, we seem to get caught up, like you said, in a power struggle? Okay, that is something that you could probably figure out, but it's going to take some therapy. This is not something that couples often can do on their own. And left to your own devices, if you're not able to go into couples therapy, you're probably better off with another partner, because why enter a relationship that's difficult from the get-go when you can actually find relationships that are easier? I'm not saying that you wouldn't be well suited together, but it's going to take more work.
Yeah. And well, and since you've been in couples counseling, that, you know, at some point, not every relationship is supposed to, you know, be the one. Now, I want you to answer this question, because this is a really good one.
And then we have to stop.
Well, yeah, we've got 3 minutes.
No,
I'm hearing you say that everyone should be partnered. It seems to me that is extremely unrealistic. I'm gay, but don't believe it's okay to act on my orientation. I have no interest in women and have never met anyone I would want to live with for the rest of my life, male or female. What is a person like me supposed to do then?
Well, I want to, so I'll say again, humans thrive on intimacy, connection, and relationship. It doesn't have to be romantic and sexual. But do you still need to be touched? Do you still need hugs? Do you still need a massage occasionally? Do you still need to have physical contact and sexuality, perhaps, with yourself or others? Yeah, I mean, you still need to connect with other people. Do you need close friends? Do you need people to spend time with? Do you need people who have common interests and fun? If you fill your life with connection, you will do as well as someone who is in a loving, intimate relationship. I'm not saying what anybody should or shouldn't do at all. I'm simply saying that all of the research on human relationships and human health tells us that those of us who are in long-term committed, loving relationships, when we are happy, we live longer, we're more creative, we're healthier. That's just the facts. That it tells me that probably most of us are better in close relationship. Does that mean it has to be a pair-bonded romantic sexual relationship? No. But you do need to keep people close to you and have a deep sense of family and connection, and that is how you will stay healthy.
Okay, so now I'll go with, we're out of time. I invite you all to come back next week. And actually, for partners that want to talk more about support and codependence, Dr. Rob will be doing the webinar on Friday. And he also does In the Rooms at 6 p.m. Pacific time on Friday night, so you can find him there as well. So, but there's lots of places. Dr. David Fawcett does a webinar. John Taylor did one earlier today. So on Mondays, there's a noon one as well. So there's lots of places where you can find experts to help you, to answer your questions. And then, like I said, the drop-in groups, great support on those as well. So thank you all for being here. We appreciate it.
One more thing?
Yes.
We haven't mentioned tonight, we have a podcast. It's called Sex, Love, and Addiction. I have had the opportunity to interview some of the major figures today in intimacy, sexuality, healing infidelity. If you have some free time, or you're a recovering person and you want something to listen to in the car when you think about acting out, throw in Sex, Love, and Addiction. It's free and probably helpful.
I had somebody that said, every time I even think about relapsing, I listen to another podcast. And I was like, great. So, but yeah.
We're here for you. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Tell me you have a great evening.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
Bye, folks.